how to fix some of your oopses. One of the big things people do when they're painting, and God, I don't know how many times I've got this asked over the years, and I've done it myself many, many years ago. Very rarely ever happens now. But is what to do if you forget to put catalyst or hardener in your paint. And be sure to listen to the whole video, because there's really a lot of different things that you can do in different situations. So let me tell you about the theory of what you're going to try to do. Is when you recoat, you're going to try to get the new paint to harden the old paint. Okay, that's the job at hand. So if you think about this in mind, when you're having this happen, every once in a while you're going to have to strip off everything. I mean, that's the worst scenario, and it's a bad situation. I mean, it can literally, that's where you come with liquid stripper and you just start taking it off. But then you're probably going to take off all kinds of stuff. Body work, primer, it's a mess. So really, before you do that, you're going to want to try a couple of these things here. So what you want to try and do is, let's say you used a catalyzed urethane or catalyzed clear coat, and the paint is still wet. Now that's probably the best time to deal with that. Let's say you found out you're going, oh my God, I did this and my paint's still wet, and I didn't put any catalyst in the paint. So what you want to do is put another coat on, fully catalyzed, and not put that coat on too heavy, but heavy enough to where it'll kind of mix in with the undercoats and dry. And hopefully you'll be lucky, and if you aren't, you'll notice the paint start to wrinkle. And then when it starts to wrinkle, then that's pretty much going to tell you that let it dry, and then try some of the other things. So sometimes after you completely let the wrinkled paint dry, you might have to let it dry for a week, and then wet sand it and try and put another coat over that. It may work, but most of the time at that point you're probably gonna have to strip it. So anyway, you can try to sand it down and repaint it, but sometimes you've compromised. When that paint wrinkled, it's lifted one of the coats from the other coats, and whatever you recoat over that is going to have problem with lacquer check later. So more than likely you're going to have a reoccurring situation. So okay, so what you do if you forget hardener, there's a couple different things. One of the things you want to do is your next coat you want to put on with the fastest reducer you can. So let's say another situation. Let's say it was primer, and it was 2K urethane. It may work, I'm not sure. But let's say it's polyester primer. That's the one that usually you can fix without any problems. Usually this works. You just go and make your next coat. So you find out the next day, you come out, your primers, it's all, you go to touch it and it's still sticky, so you go, oh man, maybe I forgot to put my catalyst in. You probably did, if it's the next day. So then all you do is just take the same product you just did, mix it up with just a little bit extra catalyst, and prime it again. And you come back in 2 or 3 hours, and for some reason that stuff goes through the coat and bites and makes it. It does it, fixes it, no problem. It actually goes all the way through. Usually, then what you want to do after that is go ahead and sand it, and make sure you sand through the primer you put on in some places, and make sure that it dried all the way through. So that's the way to fix that one. Let's say it's 2K urethane or whatever, or urethane paint, and you forgot to catalyze it, and you come back the next day and it's sticky. What you want to do, and this may or may not work, okay, you're fixing the problem. You know, the paint chemists are going to tell you, oh, you got to strip it all off. I mean, okay, sure, yeah, I'll just do all the work I did again. No, try this first. Okay, mix up a batch of the urethane. Okay, put a little bit more hardener or catalyst in with the paint than what you normally put in, because you're going to want that coat to dry a little bit faster than the coats underneath. You need it to dry a little bit faster, but not too fast. Okay, if it dries too fast, sometimes it'll cause problems. So a little bit more hardener than we normally put in, and recoat it, but don't bury it. Go really light. Use a really, really fast reducer. I don't care if you get dry spots in it, whatever. You're going to have to deal with that. Shoot a really light coat of the same product with a little bit extra catalyst or hardener in it, and pray. Hopefully it won't wrinkle, because if it wrinkles, you've got a problem. You're going to be stripping that car. Okay, so but hopefully you want that coat on the surface to dry over the existing cut paint, and then in an inconspicuous area, if it looks good, okay, you're probably still going to have to repaint the car, and let that dry for a few days after that, and then color sand that. Let that dry for 3 or 4 or 5 days or a week if you have a whole week. Sand it down, and then repaint the car again. Okay, with some good paint, and use hardener this time. But if it happens with clear coats, the same process pretty much. Try it, and then one of the things you're going to do after you're all done with either one of those is, before you go repaint it, sand down an area, color sand down an area as much as you can. Go all the way through the coats that you did and see that it dried all the way through. And that can be a good way to test and see if it's ready to recoat. But most of the time, that actually works. This is not by the book. This is, take it at your own risk. If it doesn't work, don't go calling me and saying, hey, you told me to do this and do. No, I tell you, here's what I'm going to tell you. Put the hardener in the paint. Don't ever do it without it. Okay, that's what I'm telling you. But to get out of a situation, sometimes these are the best ways to deal with it. Okay, so that's what you do if you forget to put the hardener in your paint. It's a really bad thing with certain products. If it's acrylic enamel, generally that'll dry. Urethane, probably not going to dry. But if you go over it, I've had to do this when other people did something. I had a guy paint a sign. They didn't put hardener in the urethane, and I go out to the job, and I'm like, oh man, and I've recoated it, and my paint dried over the old, and because it had hardener in it, the hardener reacted with the undercoats and dried the paint out. But it took a lot longer for it to dry, and the paint that I put on I had to sand down and recoat, because it just, it just didn't look very good. So I wasn't able to get it to look smooth, but I could actually sand it after that, because I went over it. If I went over there to try and sand it, the whole thing's sticky, so it doesn't sand. So, and the other thing is if you're having to sand anything, let's say you have to sand something down to recoat it, and you're doing that, use super, 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 super fine paper, 600 grit, 800 grit, 1000 grit. Use very fine paper. Do not use 220 or 320 or even 400 to sand, to repaint something like that. use super fine paper, because what that does is it'll open it up, and the solvents, or the what's it called inside, the not the catalyst, but the paint, without the uncatalyzed paint, will be open with no place for the solvents to go, because it has no chemicals in it to dry it, and it'll just cause an immediate reaction with the overcoat, and definitely going to wrinkle. So wrinkles are probably the worst repair you can deal with. A lot of times it has to be stripped. So anyway, those are some of the ideas you can use if you have the situation you forgot to catalyze your paint, forgot to use hardener. Done this a couple times, had to fix other people's usually, but not mine. Usually I'm going to say I've probably done it maybe 3 times in my whole life, in 30 years. So you learn the first time, because you go, oh my God, this was such a pain in the ass. I went through all this work, and now everything I've got's potentially ruined. And I've done it so many times that I've had to fix other people's stuff. That's pretty much what I do now anyway. But anyway, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Just want to let you know how to fix that. If you're not a new person, definitely subscribe. I've got some really good stuff. I've been doing this. This is not my job. I don't paint cars. Okay, I'm in the sign painting business, so not into cars, but it's something I do for fun at my house, in different places. I got so it's it's just a hobby type thing. I used to do it as a job, but no more. I wouldn't do it if somebody paid me tons of money. Wouldn't happen. All right, talk to you in the next video.